Welcome to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Pawadi. Later in the show, I'll talk with Tracie Jackson, footwear designer and artist. But right now, Susan Levy talks with Byron Joe, co-owner of Juniper Tree Woodworks.
This is Susan Levy. In the studio with us today is Byron from Juniper Tree Woodworks, and we're super excited to have you here. Welcome.
Hi there, Susan. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for bringing me on.
Yeah, we're so excited. I think your work is incredible, but what I really want to know is tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get started in woodworking?
Hi, everybody. First, my name is Byron Joe. I'm a Navajo Marine vet from Chinle, Arizona. Tabahan Nishlin ki ani bashichin skanazo dashiche embeche dashinele. And from going into woodworking, it did start becoming a hobby back a couple of years ago, where I first started with a laser, and from there it did develop into, because I love technology in general as well. So I wanted to kind of combine the two. Like, how can I bring this to the next level and do something a little bit different? And even the name itself, Juniper Tree Woodworks, does come from my hometown, where in Chinle, Arizona, and more so a little bit south of there is a little area called Del Muerto. And so our whole area is surrounded by juniper trees. And so I did want to bring a little bit home, with like the business that me and my sister are slowly growing.
Okay, so let's talk about juniper trees. So what do they look like? Because I'm not familiar with what a juniper tree looks like. Are they big or little? And do you wait until the tree has fallen and then you cut it? Is that how you do it?
Well, it just does depends what part of the year you are chopping the wood. It is when the trees are a little bit older, you want to chop them down. It's easier to burn for firewood or easier to work with. But the trees themselves are very unique, honestly. They're not like normal trees that have little leaves. They almost look a little out of this world because it's hard to explain without actually seeing it.
Okay.
But the leaves themselves, they look like little tiny coral-like in a way.
Okay, they look different.
Yeah, they look very different, honestly. And the trees themselves can be used for multiple things, which is why I really love it. It can be used for food. We use it in blue corn mush.
Juniper ash.
Juniper ash. We use the seeds as well in our jewelry. We use the wood for fire. We use it for you can use the cedar and the berries for art as well. You can turn it into dyes. So there's multiple uses out of it, which is also a good representation of our business we have so far, because it did evolve beyond just woodworking. It did incorporate a lot of like personalized gifts and even what my sister does with earrings, jewelry, and tumblers.
A lot of stuff. So is juniper a hardwood? Is it pretty hard?
Yes, it's a hardwood.
So whereas pine is not, correct?
Yeah, pine is a very soft wood.
Pine is soft. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you would chop a tree down. I assume they must be big because I know I was reading some of your things that you like to use like one piece of wood, right? Not multiple pieces and glue them together.
Yeah.
So they're big.
Yeah, they can be pretty big because I do like to use a lot of the same wood sheets just so that say with the perpetual calendars, if I use separate sheets, because the perpetual calendars themselves are multiple layers. So say if the middle layers are thicker than the outside layers, it's not going to spin very smoothly. It can get stuck.
I got to say, the perpetual calendars are oh my goodness, one of the best things I've ever seen. Love that. So I'm just love that product. Anyway, okay, so I know I'm jumping way ahead. So what was the inspiration and motivation by starting Juniper Tree Woodworks?
So a lot of the inspiration that helps drive us would actually be coming from a family of talented artists and makers, and a lot of the strong female role models I have in my life. Starting off with my grandmother, Shimasane Amelia. She makes beautiful weaving rugs. So if you've seen videos of our market displays, the rug on the very bottom is actually made from her.
Oh, wow.
And the pattern on there is Chinle pattern. So it's also a representation of where we come from. My late Nolly, Pauline, She was big into crocheting and knitting. She would make really complex, like blankets and little. All her couches had the little covers on them that she made. Always loved that. I'm actually wearing like one of the turquoise necklace that she got for me as well.
That's beautiful.
So I'm not sure how old it is, but I know it's got some history behind it, and helps me remind her every time we wear it. And it goes to my mom herself. She's very talented, a beater. Growing up, she did multiple forms of art. She did silversmithing, weaving, moved on to beading, and every year she would make personalized gifts for the whole family. So we do draw a lot of our energy from that, just seeing her go out of her way to make our families feel special.
That's a really nice story.
And
but then how'd you get into woodworking? Like, did you just one day pick up some wood and try carving it? Or, what did how did that start?
it was always interesting to me because I guess I come from a family of a lot of different artists, and I did wanted to take my own route. And I always see videos on TikTok and Instagram of these artists or wood burners like carving out of wood or working with wood to make these beautiful pieces. And I'm like, I want to try that. And so one day I picked it up as a hobby, and bought a laser, and I'm like, okay, let's go from there.
But you're pretty talented. Like, I don't think I could just go pick up a piece of wood and do anything like or I know I couldn't, anything like what you produce. So you obviously are very talented and gifted, and that's your calling. Pretty amazing. So I know that you were a vet. Did that figure into anything? It was the Marines, correct?
Yes, the Marines.
Okay. Did you do any kind of art when you were in the Marines, or no?
A lot of my outlet in Marines, I did a lot of drawing and sketching while I was in. Photography is one thing I really love, because during my time in the Marines, I was lucky enough to travel and experience other cultures. On top of that, take photos, document my whole experience. Because, a little small town kid living out, going to Japan.
Was that amazing?
I loved it. I really appreciate it. The culture is so different. It's like night and day coming from Japan going to the U.S. So I really do highly recommend for anybody, just to travel outside your normal space, because, even a city over, the culture is completely different and gives you a new perspective on life,
I know you're a small business owner now. And so how's your background, both professionally and culturally, influenced your growth with a small business?
After graduating high school, that's when I did go into the Marines. And in high school, I was, one of those emo kids, very introverted. So the Marines did help me build a lot of confidence in myself and help me break down those barriers and be more comfortable talking with people. Also, after the Marines, I did a warehouse job where I eventually moved into a manager role. So that helped me build a lot of my confidence, and also being able to learn the logistics of how to run a business. But with that being said, too, the big influence to start the business was with that company I was previously with. I was with them for about 3 years, and earlier this year in January, with due to the economy, I was let go.
So good time to start a new business, right? New year.
Oh, yeah.
New entrepreneurship.
Yes, ma'am. So that's where I hit the ground running. I'm like,
good.
Okay, let me take this hobby and make something with it. And with my sister, helping support me is when we, got out there, and actually in Mesa, Hope's Fry Bread.
Oh, yeah.
We had our first market there.
Yep. That's an awesome place too. Hope was on here recently.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we do know Hope and have worked with her for pretty long time before she had the store and everything else. So has it been a challenging year? Have you learned a lot?
I've learned a lot, honestly.
Being a small business owner is hard.
It's really
a lot of hours,
is.
but it's passion, right?
It really is. Like, it's a lot of work. The social media aspect of it is
yeah.
it's
a full-time job just to do social media.
It really is.
Yeah.
It takes like a couple hours just to do like a 30-second reel. Yeah.
So have you found it to be harder, though, than you thought this year?
At first, it was very daunting getting into it, but the further along we went, and especially the vendor friends and networking we're able to build, it's become a lot easier, and my anxiety has gone way down because now I know that I'm in this vendor community and we all support each other. We help network and get each other's names out there.
Yeah.
So I'm really appreciative of everybody that we've worked with so far.
And I think it's also somewhat cyclical every year. You've now been through a calendar year, so like the holidays are super busy and certain things aren't. And then at least in Phoenix in the summer, it's kind of slow because it's hot and people aren't here. I don't know if that's how it is up in Chinle, but at least you've done a year, and congratulations. I mean, a small business owner for a year is pretty amazing.
It really is, honestly. And like in February is when we made our first sale on Etsy. And overall as a business, we just, last week, I believe, we just went over 500 sales.
See? How amazing is that? And it's been less than a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for you.
It's been less than a year. It's such a milestone moment. Me and my sister were very excited. And we're just reflecting on it a couple weeks back, like, whoa.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So it sounds like you haven't had a ton of challenges, right? It sounds like it's gone pretty well this year. I'm sure it's a little hard, but 500 sales on Etsy is pretty good.
I would like to say it's been an easy journey.
But it hasn't been?
It's had its ups and downs. Like you mentioned, in the summer, it was very slow for us. But on top of just running the business, me and my sister both have full-time jobs. So
you're doing a lot. You're doing a lot.
Exactly. Our full day is
your job.
Our job. So right in the morning, I'm dropping my brother off at school, rush to work the full day, and as soon as I get off, go grocery shopping, uncle duties, spend time with the family, cook for the family, and at the end of the day, it would be like 8 o'clock, and then from there, I try to jump in the garage and use what little time I have to make some custom orders or prepare for the weekend, and usually I'll be in bed like by midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
That's a lot. So you're working full time, and then you're doing this on top of it, and you had 500 sales on Etsy.
Exactly.
So that's super impressive. So what's the importance to you of preserving and promoting Navajo traditions through your business? I look at the artwork that you brought today, and it speaks to me, and it's absolutely beautiful. How do you incorporate that into what you're producing?
Preserving our traditions definitely would have to be how, like, our stories we tell when we have our products, say, like our Navajo baskets, on a lot of our items, and say the Tree of Life that we have on a few of our other items, is being able to make our art and traditional stories into functional art pieces. So like I keep mentioning, the perpetual calendar is being able to modernize a lot of our culture to post in our home so we can more proud of. And just the stories that go along with it as well. When people ask, hey, what is the purpose behind a Navajo basket, or the story behind the Tree of Life? So I love to be able to backtrack our creation story, the story behind the hogans, behind their Navajo baskets. So I always try to impart a piece of knowledge to people who are buying our products.
So how do you balance modern business practices while maintaining your cultural authenticity?
Well, we try our best to balance our business practice with our cultural authenticity by sharing, like I mentioned before, stories with everybody. But we also try to keep a piece of our family with us at all time. So, like I said, I'm always wearing some piece of jewelry. My Nolly Pauline got me the turquoise necklace. My mom got me my turquoise bracelet and my cowboy boots.
It's beautiful.
On our display, we always have like a piece of our family with us, and we just want to make sure that we carry on all these traditions, even if we are modernizing it in a way for the new generation.
I'm glad that you bring all that together, and it's super important, and I think that people know that, and that's what you stand for. So that's amazing. So have you experienced any positive impact or support from the community? I know you talk about other vendors near you, but have other people reached out and helped you, or anything on your journey with this? Well,
honestly, we've had nothing but positive support from the local Indigenous community. everybody who comes by, even if they don't buy anything, we're like, oh my God, I love like what you do. Or the reactions we get from like even if they can't buy something now, they'll share with their friends and family back home. And then, they'll make purchases, or they'll reach out and tell us their stories of, say this keychain here is like, go live like somebody.
I know, I love that. So on the back of the keychain, I know our listeners can't see this. So it is a sheep with flowers on it, and it's like so beautiful and so sweet. And on the back it says, "Go live life like someone left a gate open." I mean, like, that's a perfect saying. I like that. So people have been super supportive. And then, what's your favorite piece that you've made? Do you have something like a favorite design or favorite? Like, I love the perpetual calendar, but what's your favorite piece?
It would be the perpetual calendar, honestly, because that is one of the pieces that does take the most time for me to make, because it takes about the span of a week to fully make one. Because one day I cut all the pieces out, the next day I sand them all down, and then next day I stain it, wait for it to finish, and then my favorite part is painting, and I just sit there for a few hours at a time knocking out all the painting, because that's my therapy time. It's my time to just sit, focus, tune the world out, and enjoy art. And
your stuff is
the process.
Amazing. Now, I know today in the studio you brought, I assume is this slate?
Yeah, it's a slate coaster. It's a very porous rock. It absorbs liquids very well, and it's laser engraved on there. So the designs, you spill coffee on it, wash it, and the design doesn't go away.
So I'm not familiar. Like, how do you put the product like on a laser, and then the laser just etches it? Mm-hmm. And that's true with every product, right? It can do, obviously it does wood and it does stone, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's sort of like a 3D printer, is that, or totally different? Like, you would just put the design in and then it would just etch it?
Yeah, it works a lot of, I know most people would think of like a Glowforge. It's a machine where you put the item on the bottom and it shines a little beam, like a little dot of light, a very focused energy light to one little spot, and it'll slowly engraves on it. And you can engrave just about anything, except for like dangerous items like, say, PVC, which can create toxic fumes.
Okay.
So there can be a lot of danger in it as well if you don't know what you're doing. It can do anything from engraving to marking, cutting.
And how long does it take something like to do a coaster like that? Does it take very long to laser it?
Not too long. Just say preparing for a market, it can take a long time. Because I normally I do them in batches. So one day I'll take to prep them all. Because when we get them ready, they're not all smooth. They're not perfect.
So you've got to prep everything before you put it on on the laser. Okay.
So there's a process with it.
They are beautiful. So what advice would you have for somebody who wants to start their own business?
I do have a few pieces of advice for anybody looking to start up on. Is to first, I recommend taking the leap.
Sort of like you did, right?
Exactly, yeah. Just go sit up at your local market, whether that be here in the Valley or even at home at the flea markets. It's just to get out there, honestly, because that was the first milestone that we had to push through. Is we're always nervous, like, oh my gosh, like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And so if you see, I think if you go back on our Instagram feed, we had like maybe 5 or 6 items.
Now you've got a lot.
Oh yeah, it's been like I said, a lot of work in process. It's just to start it, because it can be like daunting at first, but like I mentioned before, the vending community, we're there for each other. So you're always going to have your neighbors kind of hyping your product up, or even from there, even if you don't do too well or do amazing, I really do hope the best for everybody is they can move on and do like recommending more than the next market. It's just getting your foot in the door.
So you do the lasers, and then you said your sister does what?
She does a lot of the graphic design portions. She does like tumblers and like glass cans, which have been really popular lately. She does earrings as well. She makes beautiful earrings. So she's taking a lot of the jewelry crafting portion of, say, my mom's side and bringing that into, her style.
I saw, and I don't know which one of you did the earrings with, I think it was like the veterans, was it a Marine insignia?
Oh, yeah.
Was that you or her?
Oh, it was my sister.
Okay, I did see that. I thought that was pretty cool too. I like that it brought your military background with that.
Oh yeah, for
with the
sure.
Woodworking and the jewelry.
I do always try to put a piece of the military on there to show my background in the military, but also to give support to other military people who come through the markets as well.
I like that. I've never seen that. I thought that was pretty. I like that a lot. So Byron, have you had any partners that have helped you along the way? Any other businesses or any people that have helped you?
We did have a lot of people helping us through our journey as a small business. I would say thank you to is Hope from Hope's Fry Bread, Erickson from Blue to Dot Sweets, Stephanie from Madsani, Navi, Thomasina from Tabaha Creations, Dawn from Inspired by Denepazad, Roberta, as I'm sure you know her.
Oh, at PIMC.
PIMC.
Yep.
And also Chaplain Thrower from the Nevada Adopt a Cop program, plus the ladies at Cahokia as well.
That's really nice that you give a shout out to the people that have helped you, and I'm pretty impressed. How can people find out more about your art? Are you on Facebook or Instagram, or do you have a website or Etsy? How do people find you?
They can find us on Facebook, Instagram. We do keep up with the most, and recently TikTok.
Okay. What's the name?
It's under
What's the handle?
It's Juniper Tree Woodworks.
Okay.
And also our Etsy store as well. And Etsy is where we can do a lot of our online sales and shipping.
Okay, and it's Juniper Tree
Woodworks.
Woodworks. Okay.
Plural.
So Byron, thank you so much for coming on. It's been really interesting. I can't wait to go buy the perpetual calendars. So I love those. You've been an amazing guest. And again, how can people find you? What is the name of the business again?
It's going to be Juniper Tree Woodworks.
All right. So check him out on Facebook, Instagram, now TikTok, and Etsy. And he does amazing work. So thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, I'll talk with Tracie Jackson. Support for KRDP 90.7 FM comes in part from Native Health, with 2 locations in Phoenix, 4041 North Central Avenue, Building C, near the corner of Central Avenue and Indian School Road, and at 2423 West Dunlap Avenue. Native Health is also located in Mesa at 777 West Southern Avenue, near the corner of Southern Avenue and Extension Road. Native Health provides primary medical, dental, behavioral health, WIC, and wellness services for the urban Native American community. For more information, call 602-279-5262 or visit our webpage at nativehealthphoenix.org. Welcome back to Native Talk Arizona, presented by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. I'm host Lanasha Puwadi. On the phone with me is Tracie Jackson, footwear designer and artist whose brand Resilient Souls specializes in bringing together indigenous art and fashion using sneakers, paint, beadwork, and jewelry. Hello, Tracie. It's an honor to have you on our show today.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, absolutely. And please, before we get started, tell us about yourself, your journey, and your background.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Yatse She'e Tracie Jackson Yanishye. Sitnajani Nishla, Belagana Bashashin, Kiani Deshache, Do Belagana Dashanella. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. Just introduce myself with my clans. But I am Dene. I was born and raised in northern Arizona on and off the Navajo Reservation. I'm originally from Chejintra, or Star Mountain area, which is where my maternal family's from. And then I went to school in Flagstaff, and then eventually ended up going to the University of Oregon for college and graduated there, which then led me to a career at Nike, designing footwear and apparel there for about 5-6 years. And then now I am currently at Manitoba Mucklucks, which is an indigenous footwear brand, and just became their footwear designer for their company.
Oh, wow. That is so exciting and so amazing so far. Can you tell us what influenced you or what encouraged you to become a designer?
Well, I felt like designing was always in my blood because in my family, I'm a fourth-generation Navajo artisan. My great-grandmothers were both Navajo rug weavers. My grandparents are silversmiths. My mom's a silversmith. And I always like to say, like, I learned all of the above. And then also taught myself painting and beading. And my family always encouraged me to learn traditional crafts and traditional art forms to keep it alive. And so for me, art was no-brainer for me. It was so relevant in my world that, I wanted to keep it going. And eventually, I didn't know how that would look, but, I saw a N7 duffel bag, drawstring bag at the Lori Paetwa Native basketball tournament when I was growing up. And I never thought of, like, Native design mixed with sportswear. And that was kind of, like, what influenced me to really go down that path of, like, well, let's try something new and different that I've never seen before.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And then can you tell us more about how, when you were going to school, what did you go to school for?
Yeah, so I only applied to one college, which was the University of Oregon, just because the students created Nike there. And so I felt like, that might be a better university to get my foot in the door. So when I applied, I went into my advisory meeting very, very uniquely. I didn't have a major really in mind. I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly, but I went to our people and I asked them, I was like, what major do I have to choose to design for Nike? And then they basically put me in industrial design. Product design is what was called at our university. And I was the first Indigenous person to go through the program, which was really exciting and to break that barrier.
Oh, wow. That is really exciting. So after, when you started at Nike, you started as an intern, is that right?
Yes, I interned back in 2017. And at the time, I was actually a graphic designer starting off in my career. I didn't do footwear design until a couple years into it.
And what kind of encouraged you to start designing footwear specifically?
I think growing up, I was always that kid that would go to the mall and go to Foot Locker and just, window shop with all the shoes and things like that. And I'll be real, when I first heard of N7, it really, got my interest. And, I saw something I never thought could be a thing, which was Native design on sneakers. And, for me, I was always obsessed with sneaker culture. I think for me, I loved men's shoes. Like, my favorite shoe was always an Air Force One or a Jordan 3. And I think what made me want to go into sneakers was the fact that at the time when I was growing up, it was such a man's world where, a lot of sneakers didn't come in women's sizes, or if there were women's sneakers, it was very femme focused, like very pink, purples. And I was such a tomboy growing up that I hated those colors. And for me, I think I kind of wanted to break a barrier as well in the footwear world of like, why can't women have, the same type of sneakers as men? And, for me, I just kind of wanted to break that boundary, but also like bring Native design because, for me, I grew up in the art world and I saw these amazing artists at the Heard Museum and Pueblo Grande do these amazing crafts. And I thought, like, how could we, bridge these gaps together?
Oh, yes, definitely. That is very true. And I know, as you mentioned, you kind of were into the designing and also you paint as well and you do beadwork and jewelry. So how do you incorporate all of your creativity into your designs, or what sparks your creativity for your designs?
Yeah, I think looking at our Indigenous community, we are some of the most amazing artists in the world. Like, the things that we craft from the land and, the low-tech technology that we've created is what people are going back to with technology today, because it's so innovative, it's so good for the land. It's just good for everyone. And I think growing up, seeing silversmithing, seeing rug weaving, I've always had a love for pottery and weaving, basket weaving specifically. And I think for me, when I started working at that level of, working at Nike, I really wanted to show the craft and the art forms from our community, because I thought they were so beautiful. And, we're seeing these in museums, but we're not seeing it in pop culture as much. And that's where, for me, I'm like, I wanted to celebrate, the artists who encouraged me, who raised me basically since I was a kid. And, my family was always close with all the artists at the art shows that we went to. So they always gave me some feedback, gave me some guidance. And for me, I just wanted to return the favor and, show their craft and show their art forms in such a high level and in a way that sneakers hasn't seen before.
Oh, yes, definitely. And you are doing an amazing job. And kind of talking about that further, Tracie, can you tell us more about your brand?
Yeah, Resilient Souls. So I started Resilient Souls a couple years ago. For me, I still do native artwork on the side of my career. And so for me, Resilient Souls was kind of my break away from like my industry and the work that I do through the brands that I work with. And so I kind of wanted my own art that I could control and also kind of put my vision in, because I don't think a lot of people understand this, but in the industry, you're not the only designer working on projects. You have a team of designers who do pretty much every function, because it's a lot of work to put on one person. And so for me, I have to share the creative space in the industry. But for me, I wanted something so personal that, it was my vision, it was my ideas, and, coming to life in my way. And so that's where it kind of gave me that artistic freedom to really push boundaries. And, one thing I think I have to consider, and just anyone in the industry has to consider, is that, when you're designing for these brands, you can't really be as, I guess you could say like as native in some spaces. Like, you have to remember that this brand is not just for natives, it's for everyone. And, sometimes by doing those things at that level, it gives people access to the community that, might not understand that access. And so for me, going to Resilient Souls, where I can use our slang or use things in our community that we just get as Indigenous people, was kind of something that I wanted to create and, for our people. And, anybody outside the community who loves it, is obviously allowed to buy it or support it. But for me, I just wanted to be very, very Native and Indigenous focused.
Oh, yes. And kind of talking about that, how has your cultural identity kind of shaped who you are today, and how has it impacted your career journey this far?
My family always raised me with our cultural values and our culture, practicing it every day. If it's getting up, in the morning to say a prayer before sun comes up, or even just the way you treat people. And I think for me, as I left home and, moved to Oregon and moved to Portland, where it's, does have a smaller Native population than, let's say, Arizona does, or Flagstaff. And, I started to realize how people didn't know that much about our culture. And so for me, I was just going to walk into any space unapologetically Indigenous and myself, because, for me, I saw people didn't know things, and I wanted, I looked at that as an opportunity to help teach people and, teach people the way that, I was taught how to understand it. And so, I really wanted to fight stereotypes by really just being unapologetic and Native. And, if I came in as authentically myself, I knew that I could really make a change. And, standing my ground, not to like give in to like, oh, I'm not going to do this because people think this is weird. Like, I really wanted to make sure that people like respected who I was and who I came from, because at the end of the day, if you're going to have me in the room, you're going to have the whole community with me, because you can't have me without the people. And, that was something that I really made sure people knew, was that, you get me, you get the whole Indigenous community involved in it, and you can't have me without them.
Oh, yes, that is very true, Tracie. Thank you for sharing that. And Tracie, what motivates or drives you in your career?
I think the more that I talk to people from our community, the more it inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing, because, I get my fair share of weaknesses where I miss home and I want to come back home and just be with family and just be back, out home on the res with our horses and our relatives. But, when I hear the stories of, our people's experiences of what they go through. I mean, that's what actually inspires me a lot with the work that I do is, growing up, I used to go out to the res with my grandparents, and we would visit all of our relatives, for the whole weekend, stay out home, and, just spend hours talking to, like, my uncles, my aunts, my grandparents. And I think hearing those personal stories has always motivated me to do what I do, because for me, I'm like, okay, well, how do I tell your story? How do I tell your experience that you went through? And, I look at myself as just a resource for the community to storytell. And for me, I have the permission of these people to tell their stories because they want their stories heard. And I look at that as, one of my biggest inspirations is, when I feel weak, I talk to someone from our community, and it's like they give me the ambition, they gave me the strength again, because, I realize it's like I'm not just doing this for myself or my family, I'm doing this for everyone, because this impacts everyone.
Yes, it definitely does. And it's just so amazing to kind of see those indigenous looks or those indigenous touches to all of the work that you do. What do you consider to be one of your biggest accomplishments?
Oh, that's so hard to choose. Let me think. I would say, looking at this last year, when I was at Nike, I was doing a lot of, amazing work, helping, really build the design program culturally, and, teaching other people cultural design and how to respectfully design for communities. But I think, having the courage to leave one of the biggest sportswear companies in the world to go to an indigenous, brand was a huge leap for me. And, I got a lot of people saying stuff like, oh, you're making a mistake. Why would you do that? Like, they were looking at it like it was a dumb decision. But for me, I've never felt so disconnected from my community this past year. And for me, looking at an opportunity like Manitoba where, I'm designing moccasins, I'm designing mucklucks, I'm designing for the community, we're giving back. To me, those were things that are the values that I have within myself. And, for me, it was scary, but I'm very proud to leave a corporate giant to go to a mid-sized brand to help, build this brand up, not just for the brand, but for the community. I basically want to create, a journey to basically bring more indigenous designers into footwear and the footwear industry. And I feel like by going to Manitoba, I can achieve that and actually help bridge that gap with the community and help get more people involved.
Well, yes, definitely. And kind of talking about Manitoba, can you tell us more about your work there?
Yeah, I had just started in August this year, so I'm still new to the brand, but, I was hired on as their footwear designer. And I think one of the most encouraging and, it makes me a little emotional to hear this, because it just shows like the type of thinking and the type of work that they're doing in an indigenous country was, when they hired me as their footwear designer too, they looked at, they told me like, we're not hiring you to be a footwear designer too. We're hiring you to be our next footwear director. And to hear that, investment from a company, to hear that they want to invest in an indigenous person to lead their footwear sector, that's where for me, I was like, no question. You guys believe in me just as much as I believe in you. And so that's why, I made the decision to go over there. And I felt, and to be honest, in the few months that I've been there, I've learned so much about footwear design. And I feel like my heart is so full now because I've connected with so many more indigenous people, and I'm, traveling back home, and I get to actually be back home with my people. And I think that's something that I just needed, was to be back in the community space. And I'm so thankful that there's brands like Manitoba who are doing those good things, who are B Corp certified, who are for profit but doing things for good.
Wow, I bet it is a really big, rewarding feeling just to be able to do all of that. And I know you've accomplished many milestones. Tracie, do you have a favorite success story or memory?
Ooh, yes. I have multiple ones. It's so hard to choose which one to share today. I think one of my most successful collections that I worked on, and it might make me a little emotional just because of the time it happened, but we released a collection that was focused on mental health, and it was released back in 2020. And I know it's just a footwear collection and apparel collection, and we're not solving problems with these type of things, but the storytelling I felt like was so authentic because we were talking about intergenerational healing and how healing has no borders. And I referenced plants from Canada all the way down to Mexico that were healing plants that we used in teas, medicines, ointments. And, I really wanted, at the time, 2020, COVID was happening, and everyone's mental health was being affected. And I felt like that collection, when the root of it actually was started because of, just trigger warning, but our suicide rate being so high compared to the national average. And I felt like we needed to really address that. But how do we address that in a positive way that doesn't, put us in a negative space or make us sad because we already know what we're going through? And so that's where I wanted to root it in medicinal plants that we use. And so therefore, I wanted to represent all of Indigenous country from Canada all the way down to Mexico and our communities and how our medicines have helped us and have really brought us back to who we are. And so I think that was probably one of my most successful collections I've ever made. And I think it was just because of the storytelling behind it. And, having the Native Wellness Institute, be in the campaign was a huge win. And even them sharing their exercises they use to help trauma inform and help with trauma care, it was, to me, one of the most successful things that I could have ever been part of, just because of the impact it did with the people who do the work and the people who need the work done.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Tracie. And Tracie, what are your your day-to-day or weekly duties like as a designer?
So I feel like people would look at my schedule and think like, oh my gosh, what are you doing every day? Because for me, I try to keep my schedule pretty open outside of my meetings. Of course, if I have a meeting, I will be there on my laptop, present and everything. But when I don't have meetings, I try to be very loose with my schedule, kind of like in the moment, like, oh, you know what, this sounds great. Let's go do that. Or let's go to this art show today. And for me, I like to try to keep it interesting and not really tie myself down to things unless, I need to. Just because, I like to be on my toes and live in the moment. And I think as a designer, having those unexpected moments or unpredictability or even just being uncomfortable is what really makes you grow and see things for what they are in new ways. And so for me, I try to, challenge myself in that way of like, okay, well, what am I going to do today? And, of course, I try to put health and fitness in there as well. So I always make sure I go for a run and stuff. So I feel like that's maybe where I get this energy to keep doing more things. But yeah, I try to keep a loose structure so I can just go with the flow.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And also speaking at different events, I know just recently this past September, you were a part of the Global Fashion Summit in Boston. Can you tell us more about that experience?
Yeah, that was a shocking experience to have because I just do the work that I do and, just go home. So to hear that they wanted me to be on a panel and speak was so exciting, but also, I felt like I had a big responsibility to, explain some things that I've went through personally and just the way that I see the industry. And, I'm very thankful that our conversation was one of the last conversations during the conference. And I felt like a lot of people really learned a lot from us. We discussed, sustainability, which is now called circularity, the circularity of Indigenous values, but also like how we're already doing this work. Like we've been leading sustainability since we've been on this land. And that's something that I think people need to understand is that they need to stop being scared to talk to us directly. They need to actually have a direct line to us and stop going through a filter or somebody else who's interacted with our communities and actually talk to us directly because we have the knowledge, we have the experience. I mean, we've been proven by science, been doing this for a long time and been successful at it. And as I see the industry start to go into low tech, and for those that don't know what low tech is, it's basically traditional ecological knowledge, aka our traditional teachings. And so a lot of companies and a lot of the industry is going back to low tech technology because of the intentionality of considering 7 generations beyond yourself. And going back to the old ways of using materials from the land instead of plastics or synthetics. And I basically kind of stood my ground there and just let people know, like, hey, if you guys want to do this work, talk to us, bring us to the table, because at the end of the day, we built this table for you guys to have this conversation on. And so we need to be in the room because we're the experts in this space. And, if you decide to not go with us, that's fine. We'll continue to do this work with or without you. And, we need to stop looking at the Indigenous community as being helpless or needing, Western society to help support them. In fact, it's the opposite way around, where Western society needs Indigenous people to keep the world in a balance. And, the more that they understand it, the more impact that we can actually create collectively together.
Well, yes, definitely. And kind of on the same topic of opening those doors, what advice would you have for others who maybe wanted to follow in the same career path as you? What advice would you have for them?
I know it can be very difficult. I didn't know how to get into footwear when I was growing up either. It's a very challenging industry because not a lot of schools teach it, unless it's specifically like Pencil University, which has a school in Portland, Oregon, as well as Detroit, and programs beyond that. And I would say, people, if you want to get into footwear design, learn moccasin making from your community. I took a class from the Arsatori School, which is considered one of the best footwear schools in the world, that is based in Italy. And I was shocked. I asked the head professor when I took my class, I asked him, what is the hardest class that you guys teach through your school? And he responded with moccasin making. And I was so shocked to hear that, because I was thinking in my head, like, why would I learn moccasin making through an Italian guy who lives in Italy when I could learn moccasin making from so many tribes from across the country? If it's my own tribe, or a Sinet, or if it's the Lakota, or if it's a Mukluk up in the First Nations, like, it kind of, blew my mind to think that, like, these non-native people are teaching moccasin making and are considering it one of the hardest footwear classes to learn, but yet our communities teach it. So I would encourage youth, like, learn your tribe's moccasin making, because the industry doesn't even understand how that is, and it's considered one of the hardest shoes to make. So learn it. And then from there, take classes at LaSalle University or Portland, go to Portland, and, the footwear schools there at the University of Oregon, they have a sports design program. I mean, there's, I would say, do your research, but also, don't be afraid to ask people questions. I've always tried to be a resource in the community because I know how difficult it is. And for me, I've mentored kids who've gone through university, who wanted to do footwear design. I helped one of my mentees get an internship at Keene this past summer, and he's now an Indigenous footwear designer in the industry as well now too. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out to people, because a lot of us who are in the industry want to help everyone else. And there are resources for people who are interested, like Claim the Stories. I was actually on their podcast with Dwayne, and Dwayne's also another footwear designer. And we were two representations on that podcast for BIPOC people in the industry. So, don't be afraid to reach out, talk to people, but, also do your research on what specifically you want to do, because that also determines what, schools you go to, what career path you go into, what you might need. But I would say, as a Native youth, go back into your own cultural stuff, because that is the foundation of what design is going to be in the future, because they want to go back to our methods of making.
And finally, how can our listeners find more information about you and your work, and how can they contact you if they have further questions?
I do have an Instagram called Resilient Souls, R-E-Z, like Res. Just literally the word resilient, but with an E-Z. And then Souls, play on Souls, S-O-L-E-S, like the shoes. But if you message my website, Instagram gets kind of crazy with messages. So I recommend reaching out on my website. That has my email attached to it as well on my Instagram. I try to limit my social media so I don't get too overwhelmed with the communication, just because, I have my personal email, I have my work stuff, and then I have my social media. But I try to use my Instagram and my website as ways for anyone to contact me. On my website, resilientsouls.com, I actually have a little contact page that you can type in, or form of if anyone wants to collab or any fundraisers. I want to help as much as I can with the means that I do. So I'm happy to share as much as I can with anyone who is interested. So, please reach out. I would love to help you with your career choice. And, if you want to get into footwear, I would happily share contacts for people to follow, or even just programs to join.
I would like to thank you, Tracie, for taking time out to talk to us today, to give us all of this great information, giving us a glimpse of all the journey that you've been a part of, and also telling us more about your brand.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate, this level of conversation, and, I hope it helps people. And again, if anyone needs anything, please let me know, because I'm happy to help, and I really do want to help in all aspects.
Thank you for listening to Native Talk Arizona, supported by Native Health and KRDP 90.7 FM. Audio editing by Javier Quiroga, and the executive producer is Susan Levy. And I'm host Lanasha Puwadi. We hope you tune in again next week. If you have any questions, please email us at nativetalkaz@radiophoenix.org.